All right, we are recording. So I will jump back here and let's see what here we go. How do other TCs intro MoveEasy to clients? Yeah, if you go to our Facebook page, they have a PDF in the files section of our Facebook page, and it's going to give you information on not only MoveEasy, but there's like a teaser video that you can send out to your agent showing the value of using it. And then there's also some other resources towards the back of that pamphlet. So if you look at that resource pamphlet for MoveEasy, all the information is in there. We'll probably do another webinar soon as we launch the new code for the $75 credit. I believe it's going to be like OTC credit or something like that as the code. But anyway, as long as they use that flyer that you send them, which is a PDF, and they can just grab the code off it, or you can just tell them the code in an email and they put that in, you'll be entitled to that $75 coming back if they choose security. And we'll probably have some other promotions in the future too. We're trying to get your open to close account paid for by using some of our vendors, which, you know, I'm sure everyone will appreciate. Okay, so no more questions. So let's just kind of go through some of this, and hopefully I touch on some points that will spark some questions. First thing, actually, let me enable the chat because I'd really like to know who's on the call, how new you are. Let me see if I can do that.
Just based off the names, I can see a couple people that I recently met with. So I think that covering fields might be a good, exporting email templates. That was one of the questions that just came in.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I enabled chat so that you guys can put in how long you've been on the program, what you're struggling with. Give me those two pieces of information and I'll kind of tailor this to you guys. Okay, can you export email templates? So everything we have in templates down here is importing right now. So if you come to new import, you can import the list of things here, but you can't export just because it gets a little funky. Now we do have some things on the back end that we might be able to help with. You'd have to reach out to support@help@opentoclose.com or click the little purple button down the bottom right and ask to talk to our implementation team, and they can give you some more information on that. But really there's no good way right now to export email templates. So something we have been looking at, we do have the ability to import them. So we just don't have them on the export list so far. So. All right, let's jump over to fields. We'll just start there. If anyone doesn't know let me just go over menu items really quick. If you're looking for the knowledge base up here in the top right, you have the support center here. You also have the idea lab where you can put your ideas in. You have keyboard shortcuts. These are really helpful. Control O I use all the time to go back to my organization screen without having to click through menus. Closing the center panel, Control K, that's a helpful one. Notes, Control N just to pop those up. A new property, if you want to start a new property, you can do Shift Control P. So you can look through these and see which ones. Control S for looking at your smart blocks. That's a really good one. And merge fields, Control A. Those two I use quite a bit. But you can look through here and see what works for you, and hopefully you can cut off some time. Again, in here you have the change log as well, so you can see what has changed. It will tell you a little bit about what's changed in the program lately. So we're going to try to keep that up to date. We've been kind of lackluster on that in the past, but hopefully in the future, we'll get a little bit better at making sure all the change logs are. Okay. Organization here, apps and API under this gear icon. You got phone numbers and stuff under there as well. Global settings, that's a big one. Under the hammer icon, not only are there templates and fields, but there are also the filters, and the filters are going to be your contact roles, file roles, things like that. So if you didn't know where to find those are there. Let's go ahead into the field editor and we'll take a quick look at fields. So does anyone have any specific questions on fields? Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of dive in here.
We do have two questions, but they came in through chat.
Sure.
One of them is how do I connect open to close to Dotloop?
Okay. I can handle that. Let's see. Okay, cool. So make sure if you have questions, they're going in the Q&A so we can keep track of them, make sure they're getting cleared out. If you just want to tell me a little bit about your business and where you're at, then you can go ahead and use the chat. It just makes it a little bit cleaner, and that's why I usually have the chat turned off. Okay, so let's go to Dotloop. So there's a couple different ways to use Dotloop. You can either bring in a loop and create a transaction from a loop. I don't really recommend this way, and I'll show you why in a second, but you can do it this way. You can say import a loop, and then it's going to go and connect to your account. The first step actually would be coming over here to your apps and APIs and making sure that you connect Dotloop. So you can come over to Dotloop here, and you would have a connect button, and you would be able to connect it with your API key. Once it's connected, then you'll see the ability to import your loop. When you come over here, you can grab any of your loops and create a field map for that. So you have to tell the system, like, the field in Dotloop that's called closing might be equal to the field in open to close called closing date, right? It doesn't know the difference between those two. You have to match them up. So over in our template section under API field mapping, you can come over here and add a new one. You can choose Dotloop. And then once you choose Dotloop and name it, it will give you, let me see if I have a Dotloop one in here somewhere. There we go. It will give you all the fields over in Dotloop, and then you can choose the fields in open to close that are going to match up with those, so that when you do this transfer from Dotloop to open to close, it knows where to put those fields. Okay, so those are the two things you need to do first. Then you would come over, import the loop, and then all you would do is grab your field map, go to the next screen. It's going to ask you what team you want to assign this new transaction to. You're going to go through all the normal steps, and you can bring that in. Now, it's there, it's great. I don't really recommend through there though, because our intake forms are so powerful. And once you get past the initial phase of setting up open to close, I'm hoping that everyone uses the intake forms, because in the intake forms, you can say, if there's financing on this file, I want to add my financing fields, my financing tasks, my financing documents, my financing XYZ. So that's why the intake forms are so powerful. The other reason the intake forms are so powerful, it could say, is there a referral on this transaction? If you say yes, it could add additional fields in there for your agent or your TC to fill out. So you can keep the transactions very streamlined and keep the appropriate information in the transaction that needs to be there. Not too much, not too little. So the way that I typically recommend to people is go ahead and use our intake form once you have those set up, and create the file from the intake form, because it's going to create it perfectly. It's going to have the right amount of tasks, the right amount of fields, the right amount of everything in there. Then you're going to come into the transaction, and under the More tab, you can come over here to Dotloop, and now you can choose your loop to link to it. Okay, so you've used your intake form, and you don't have to turn on the ability for them to download contacts and fields from our intake form, although I do recommend it. You can bring that stuff over by linking a property. So I can link a property to Dotloop. I can change. So you may have 500 different agents with 500 different profiles. You can have all their profiles in here. Or if you have an admin profile for the whole office, then you can just use that one. But once you choose your profile, it's going to give you all your loops. You choose your loop, you link that loop. And now over in like the documents section, you're going to be able to come here and say, send this to Dotloop. Or over in the contact section, you would have a little button here to send to Dotloop here. So you can send stuff back and forth from or to Dotloop. You know, there are limitations on all these APIs depending on how good their API is at that company. Like, we've set it up pretty well on our side, but there are those things that they just don't let us do. Like in SkySlope, they won't let you send documents over on a listing for some odd reason. It's like they just stopped the API at a certain point and didn't add anything else. So we will be constantly improving these APIs. Actually, I have a meeting about that coming up here, but we do have some limitations. So hopefully that answers your question on, you know, how do you connect open to close to Dotloop? You want to go through the API and apps first, connect it, and then you can either import a loop or connect a loop on the back end. So, and if you have any further questions on that, feel free to either post them here or get with our support team, and they can kind of walk you through an actual transaction.
Awesome. We have one other one that came into the chat as well. It says,
see it
just
here.
transferred from TC workflow. Can you still confirm if a field is hidden, but still checked purple? Will it show in the portal?
Yeah. So it will not show in the portal. It should not show in the portal if it's hidden. If it's hidden. So here's the thing. Let me go through basic strategy on these fields real quick, because this will clear it up. So if a field is hidden, it won't come into the transaction. If it's not in the transaction, it doesn't even have the option to show up in the portal. Okay. So it kind of puts this imaginary wall up in between fields that are in the transaction and fields that aren't in the transaction. The only way a field can be shown in the portal is, first of all, if it appears in the transaction, and second of all, if it has the purple star here next to it saying that you want to show it in the portal. Okay. And then you also have the added ability on, let me go over here real quick to a transaction and go over to documents. And let's say that you want to exclude this from the view. You can exclude this whole folder, or you could exclude just this document so it doesn't show up in the portal as well. Same with contacts. You can exclude this contact from showing up over in the portal. And what was the other one? Oh, tasks and notes, tasks and notes. So in tasks, I can say, let's see here. Oh, here's the exclude button. So you can exclude this one. Now you would want to do this in the templates, because if you want to exclude it, you probably want to exclude it on every single transaction. So you would go over to your task templates and exclude anything that you don't want the agents or clients to see in the template. That way, when it comes into the transaction, you're not having to click these buttons every single time. Okay. And then notes. Whoops, sorry about that. I'm opening up other screens here. In the notes section, you can exclude those. The other thing you can do is exclude certain things automatically. So like if I never want to show my notes to agents and clients, I can come over here to the global settings and I can come down to defaults. And over here, I have a list. Where is it? Where is the, oh, it's up here in notes, sorry. It's up here in note settings. You can say, all these will automatically be excluded by nature, but if you don't want them excluded, then I can come in here and say, don't exclude my property notes, or don't exclude my task notes, or don't exclude my contact notes, or whatever. So you do have that ability to kind of override the system. All right. Okay, so let me get off the chat here and come back over to the Q&A. How I see a contact's nickname within a property. So it's a good question. Let's see here, contacts real quick. So I believe, yeah, I don't know if they show up in here. Let me go to Bob Barker on the contacts section, and we're just going to try one right now because I can't remember. Let's see, George Costanza. Let's make him a, let's have a nickname for him. Save that. Make sure that if this is ever purple and you're typing in here, that you hit the enter button so that it actually saves it. If you don't hit that enter button, it's not going to save it. Okay, let's go over to that transaction again. Go to history, transaction. Okay, let me see if George is in here. There he is. Yeah, it doesn't show George's nickname in here. That's interesting. That might be a good thing for the Idea Lab. Diana, maybe pop that in to be able to see like a nickname in quotation marks, or maybe off to the side, or maybe just add another little line here with nickname. That would probably be good. And let me check one more thing while we're in here. Let me check the fields, contact roles. You do have the ability to put it in as a merge field in your emails. So if you wanted to put nickname, and a lot of times people will put this as a smart block. So if there is a nickname, you know, they want the nickname in there, but if there isn't, they don't. So you can do some things around that as well. All right. Can we access multiple agents SkySlope within? Yeah, you can add as many as you want. That was one of the features that was really cool, is you can come to apps and APIs. And under the apps, when we go to SkySlope, manage profiles, you can add, so you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 profiles in here right now. If you want to add a new one, you can add it here. Make sure you get that access secret key, submit it, and then that will be added to your list. And that was just in case you missed that, I kind of went quick there. That was under the gear icon, apps and APIs. And then once you get in there, just go ahead and click on the manage profiles under SkySlope right here. Okay, is there a way to rearrange the document buttons? Not the 4 that can be created, but the standard ones. No, those are standard. They're there. Now you can get rid of some of them. Let me go to the transaction again. So you, the notes are always here. The priority is always front. We had to standardize that. The exclude button is always here. There may be a BR button here for broker review that you can take out, and then the missing button. So those are our 4 standard ones. They're always at the beginning. The only thing you can rearrange is anything that you've created after. All right, we are out of questions. Let's see here if there's anything else on. One thing in the program that, and we probably need to update these a little bit because they're probably older videos now, but one of the things that people don't often see is how it works. This should pull up a video on the screen and how this screen works, or in this case, it's a procedure. So if you ever get stuck on a screen and maybe want to check something before you contact support, we do have these throughout the program. If you are a Follow Up Boss user and you connect Follow Up Boss, it'll show up here, or you can go into the More tab. We have all our APIs under the More tab. So if you're using Follow Up Boss, DocuSign, MoveEasy, SkySlope, Dotloop, Brokerment, we'll be adding some more to this in the future. But if you do have access to DocuSign, it's kind of hidden. It's not here. This is a folder that shows some of the stuff, the envelopes that have happened. But to initiate a DocuSign, it is a little bit hidden here. When you click on the buttons for the documents, it's under the options here. I did have someone ask that the other day. So you can open up a DocuSign here, and then you can fill out who it goes to, have them, do you want the signed documents to come back in to open to close? If so, go ahead and check that button. And then send automatic reminders. You can set the reminders for however many days you want to the receiver. All right, we are quiet today. So let's just go back to, actually, let's go to something semi-new for the TC workflow users and just for the users of open to close in general. We do have a new reporting tab. It is on the version 2 pricing. So if you guys want access to this, then you need to change over from version 1 to version 2. There's not much change between the pricing. I think it's like $30 difference on the pricing, but you do get access to commissions, reporting, messaging, depending on what plan you're on, DocuSign, depending on what plan you're on, a lot of little buttons here and there to make your life easier. But one of the things that I wanted to show you, if you're on the version 2 pricing and you're on the basic, you get 1 page with 4 widgets. If you're on the middle tier, you get, I think, 3 pages with 4 widgets on each page. And then if you're on the scale plan, you get unlimited. So this is a cool way to report on what's happening in your transactions. You can come in here and create a page called, in this case, I called it contract status, and then I added widgets. So active, pending, pending acceptance, and closing. And you can change these by the volume, the amount, or you can change them by the number. So how many actives do I have, or how much in volume do I have with those pendings? You can report on your users, your TCs, how much they're managing, or you can report on your agents, how much they have. In order to use this agent, you're going to have to assign the agent to the file. So if you're in a file, make sure that in here in the agent portal user that you have Brian attached to this as the agent portal user. Otherwise, it won't report on him. Okay. The other thing is commissions. So let's see here. How do we switch to version 2? Just email support and let them know. And they will, if you're on the premium plan now, it's $69 per user. If you're on version 2, it's $99 for the first user, so $30 extra, and then $69 per every user after that. And then you'll get access to different things in there. One of the things that I'm going to go over next is commissions. So let me actually go to a Okay, so under commissions, if you're on the base plan, you'll be able to type this in, do a commission structure. If you're on the pro plan, you'll be able to save templates to it. And if you're on the scale plan, you'll have unlimited templates. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to grab the price. You're going to set it to say, take that price, multiply it by whatever, something from a field. You could fill out your fields and have all these sync in. So you could say 3.5% was my commission total over here. Well, it's going to pull into the step and it's going to calculate my purchase price times 3.5%, give me my GCI, and then you can keep splitting these all the way down. You can do broker splits, team splits. Within the team split, you may want to do a transaction fee, a donation, an agent, an ISA, a showing agent. You can do all these things within. And so depending on what level you're on, it's just going to give you more and more templates and more reports per transaction. So if you wanted a report for your bookkeeper, one for the team, one for the escrow agent, whoever, you can create multiple as you go up the ranks. All right. Just transferred from TC workflow. How do I reorganize my fields? I want to add in fields that are for specific states I manage. Can I update fields view on my property? I wouldn't update it on the property. I would update. Well, yeah, you can. After you create them in the file editor, you can come in here and manage, and then you can add fields to your actual transaction. It won't automatically add them unless you're using automated triggers, which I'll touch on in a minute. But let's go over to fields real quick. All you got to do is add new fields, is come over here. If you have a certain section you want them in, add the field here. So add a field here, and this is going to add it to the address section. Add a field here. This is going to add it to the property details section. And then you can add whatever field you want in, as many as you want. You can rearrange them. You can select multiple. If you want to delete all these, if you want to move them, you want to add a webhook to them, if you want to add the calendar, whatever you want to do. If you are using other states, talked about this a little bit last week, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can either, I wouldn't recommend this, but you can do a field group with other states like this. That's probably the most cumbersome way to do it. I would say if you're going to do different states, I would come down here to like, let's say, find one that makes sense. Escrow. So in escrow, you may have a different field for something in California. So you may want to have a duplicate field like earnest money amount, and maybe this one's called something just a little different, and then you could put a CA after it or before it. So, or you could have a whole nother section called California escrow details, and you could have another section called Wisconsin escrow details, and you can have another section called Pennsylvania escrow details. And then in your intake form, now you can trigger the appropriate one. So you're always going to bring in, if there's an escrow, if there's an escrow company, you're always going to bring in escrow details. But then if you're in California, then also bring in my California escrow details. So you can do that either by putting fields in one big section and having a CA or a WI or an AZ or an FL or whatever on the back or front end of these, or you can just have a whole separate section. I like the section. That way I can look at them all at one time and I can change those and manipulate those. And I think there's a huge advantage to being able to use field sections in the intake form, because if you're triggering something by a section, so let's say I'm saying, if there's financing on the property, I want my financing field section to come in. Well, if I add stuff to that field section later down the line, it's still going to come in the right way. If you're triggering individual fields, every field you add, you're going to have to remember to add it to your intake forms. So it's a lot cleaner if you're adding fields to sections instead of just adding, if this happens, add this field, add this field, add this field, add this field. That's not a great way to go, because you're never going to remember to update those every time. Maybe you will. I wouldn't be able to remember to update those every single time I updated a field. So I like to have them in sections, and then as much as possible, just trigger the section to come in. No matter what edits I've made to this field section, it's going to know to bring in that whole field section. So if I delete something, if I add something, it's going to work the way I intended if I'm triggering those field sections. So that's the way I would do it. There are other ways, like I said, field groups. In the future, we've been looking at tagging things. There's a bunch of other things, but for the meantime, I would say just create like a a financing section, and then maybe a California financing section, an Arizona financing section, or whatever finance, and just make sure that those assimilate over to your intake forms and make sure your intake forms are accounting for those. Okay. Next question is, can we schedule triggers to go out? Yeah. Depends on what you mean.
Yeah,
You
we've
can
got
do it.
kind of a follow-up from Patty. It's the second question. I just popped it up for you. Can you see it? Right now we are inspecting.
Yeah, right now we're inspecting our trigger emails before they go out. Is there a way to schedule triggers to go out? Just like regular emails, we can schedule it. Yeah, so you don't want to inspect them. I'm assuming that's what she's getting at.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's go over to a transaction. Be real careful as you're doing this. If you're sending out emails automatically, you want to make sure that they have a very low volume of merge fields or smart blocks, because you really get yourself in trouble by accidentally sending something you didn't mean to. But that being said, let's go into some triggers here. And let's open up, let's see here, where's an email here? Okay, so under the email, you have the option to queue it, which means it's going to go up to the health bar for you to check before it goes out, or you turn that button on. Now, this button, I believe, is on our premium add-on or our pro plan, depending on if you're on version 1 or version 2. You have to have the upgraded plan, the one upgrade, to get to this. Okay, but what this is going to do is, and it's going to remind you, and it's going to flash at you, and we're trying to make this as apparent as possible so you don't screw this up. When I check this task off, it's going to send this email. So whether you don't have a field filled in correctly or you forgot to do something, it's sending it. So be real careful on this email that you don't have a lot of, like I said, merge fields and smart blocks, because someone could make a mistake. So if you're going to send these automatically, what I typically use these for is like text message updates to my agents. It's like the sign went up, check off the task, an automatic text goes out and says the sign went up on 123 Main Street. And that's easy, because if it accidentally goes out and they're like, hey, wait a second, did the sign really go up? And you're like, no, I'm sorry, I accidentally hit that, I made a mistake. No big deal if it's your agent. If it's going to the client and that happens once, maybe you're okay. Twice, they start to lose a little faith in you. So just be real careful about these automatic sends. Okay. And once you turn that back off, that goes away. This turns back to black. We try to make it red so that it kind of catches your attention as you turn that on. All right. Is there a way to check off multiple task triggers at the same time? To clear at one time, it seems to take a while to check off each trigger because the trigger needs to load. Yeah, so I would say the way that I prefer to do it, and a lot of people do it differently, I would say the one way not to do it is go into your transaction, click on triggers, and then send them from here. I would not do this. There's a lot of things in the background that make that not a great solution. Won't go into everything right now. The way that I like to do it is go to either my task pipeline, which I work out of, or if you're in the transaction, you're actually working on one transaction at a time still, go ahead and just check off all the things that need checked off. All those will go up to the health bar at one time, and then you can go to the health bar and send all your emails at one time. You can just do a quick inspect. Yep, looks good, send, and then the next one pops up, and then inspect. And then this one I can see, wait a second, I forgot to put the contract date in here. Whoops, I forgot to put the seller transaction coordinator full name. All these things are merge fields in my email. So it's letting me know, hey, don't send this yet. We got some issues here. So I would check off all my tasks on the task pipeline, and then I would go to my health bar, my universal health bar, which I'll show you in a second. And then I would just start checking off all the emails that I need to send. If you're more of a person who likes to work one transaction at a time, that's totally fine. You can do the same thing. Just check off all your tasks here and then come to this health bar. I prefer just to do, I like to look at it as a holistic approach. And so I can come in here and check off all my tasks that I need to, and then and ignore this number. I don't update this account, so we're way behind. But so there's 1,000 triggers that need to go out on all my properties. I can click on that, and now it's going to load, and I can go down and inspect these or take care of any messages, mistakes, things that I've done. All right. Yeah, you can schedule it too, Patty. So when you go to that health bar, now again, you need to be, I think, nope, scheduling is on the base plan. Yeah, scheduling is on the base plan. It's just a little hidden. So when you come in here, okay, let me go ahead and select the trigger. Select the trigger. Let's say you're working at 3 o'clock in the morning. You want to send these out at 8 a.m. Go ahead and select them all, schedule, and then just pick a time and a day. So I want to send these tomorrow. I want to send these at whatever time. I'm not going to do that because I want to keep these in here for demo purposes, but that's how you do it. You just select the trigger and then you have some options pop up at the bottom here.
One thing I wanted to add is while you guys are switching, making that transition from viewing the properties and the tasks on the properties, and you start looking at that task pipeline, you can sort it by the address if you would like to. So if you want to focus on a specific property, you can still use the task pipeline, sort it by that specific address, and then check off your tasks that you need to. So while you're kind of making that transition, getting used to the new view, that is an option.
Yeah. And actually, I think it's still a better way to do it than go into the property just because it has a lot more features over here. So you can come in here and say, hey, I just want to work on this property. If you've touched it recently, if it's one of the last 50 you've touched or 25, I think it's 25 actually. Just click on this little house button and it's going to pull up the last 25 you touched. Click on it. It's going to show you that it's only showing the tasks for this transaction. So I only have 2 in here. But yeah, now I can, and you really should have these snapshots set up too. So this is all the filters. So you go through and put all your filters in, save the snapshot so that you can come back to that snapshot at a later time. A lot of people miss this. They're like, hey, why don't I see all this? Well, you got to check everything on, and you may not have some of the, some of these like task conditions. That's on our most upgraded plan. Property options, that's on our
Premium.
I think it's on the middle plan.
Yeah.
And then all these 3 are just on the base plan. So you have more access depending on, I like these. This is on the upgraded plan on the $99. But the cool part about this is if I wanted to go and see my documents, I don't have to go into the transaction. I just click on that. And now my documents for that transaction are up. When I click off of it, I'm right back to where I started. I don't have to go into the transaction, back out, go into another transaction, back out. Everything's right here. I'm going to call someone, pop them up, call them right here, call whatever number I want. You can do the same with, let's say I want to change a field. Click on that, change the field for that property. It always tells you the property here. You can manage fields, all this kind of stuff up here too. You can change that, hit close, and now I'm right back to where I started. I really like we tried to do that throughout the program a lot, like here on our property screen, be able to go somewhere like emails or documents and then close it and be right back to where we started. I hate when programs make me click all the way into something, do one minor thing, and then have to click all the way back out, click into something else. It just sucks your day, from you. So we tried to, as much as possible, even up here in 1, 2, 3, 4, start typing the address. You hover over this button and you have some limited options here as well. You can also click on this and go to the health bar. So you can see there's a lot of little shortcuts throughout the program on easy ways to navigate and get around. Okay. When someone sends me a text via my OTC number, can I get a notification or does it just come to email? Well, it'll come to email, but it'll also give you a little red button down here. So if you're in the program, you'll see this red dot. And then you can set it up to come to your email as well. All that is in the, I believe it's in the, whoops, sorry about that. Let's see here, global settings. And let's see, text. Do I want an email? Property incoming text messages, income form new submission. So where do I want my text coming from? All right, we are out of questions. Let's see here. One thing a lot of people don't see is sometimes an agent will say, hey, I submitted this intake form and you never received it. Well, it might have been because they didn't hit enter. They might have screwed something up. They had still something in red that they didn't complete. You can come in here to this fire icon and go to incomplete. And I can see all the ones that are in process right now. So hopefully you don't have this many. Obviously it's a demo account, so we mess around with it all the time, but you should have like one in here from an agent. And then you can tell that agent, hey, can you go back and look at that intake form and see if there's any red, or see if you didn't hit submit again, or do something. And hopefully, if for some reason that doesn't work, then you contact support and support will try to take a look at it. That actually brings up a good point. Can I get a notification from the app if it's on my phone? Okay, so Diana's asking about the text again. So mobile, that's our 2023, one of our main 3 things that we're going to be working on. We are going to totally revamp the mobile app like you guys have never probably even imagined. So it's going to be so much better. There's going to be push notifications for multiple things that can come to you that you can turn on or off. There's going to be a lot more happening with mobile in 2023. So we're actually enlisting a lot of help in that department from extra developers to make something that's really, really usable, and not only just read only. The agents are going to be able to do some more things in their agent portal so that they can help you throughout the transaction. So sorry. So I just wanted to skip off that and get her question answered before we went too far. One thing that came up this week, someone submitted an intake form and things didn't appear in their transaction for some odd reason. Who knows what the reason was? One way to check that, and this is a really handy feature. This is probably one of Matthew's favorite additions this year to the program, I think. If you go to the health bar and say you see a task template didn't come in or something, which shouldn't happen, so there's some issue. But if you come over here to the intake submission, there are no triggers. Intake approval, no triggers. What it would do is list them here, and you'll be able to see what actually fired, and if it didn't fire, why it didn't. Maybe there's a field wrong. Maybe someone accidentally put no, there wasn't a well instead of yes, there was a well. All the information will be in here, and it will give you a really good clue onto why something happened or why it didn't happen. So let me try to actually a different transaction, see if I can find one that has that intake submission. Here we go. So here you can see everything that happened on the intake form, and we can see what the conditions were. And if it's red, that means it didn't fire. So we can go back through here. And if it didn't fire and you see that, you can say, let's go ahead and retry this one. And I can go ahead and retry that. And now it's going to refresh my property and bring that in. This one didn't happen either. And this one didn't happen either. And now you can see that we refreshed that. And now everything's in the transaction. So that should never happen. You shouldn't have to worry about the screen. But if for some reason you see something that didn't come in, maybe there's a bug, maybe something didn't get filled out right, it's a good way to investigate it. All right. Again, since we do have a high amount of people that are pretty new to the program, don't get too worried. I know I mentioned intake forms a lot because it's a huge automation feature, and it's a great thing to standardize your transactions and do a lot of the work for you and automate a lot of that initial process. But don't worry about it too much when you're brand new. You want to just come in and get your foundation right and make sure that everything's working the way that it worked in your last program. Then let's go ahead. Once you get comfortable with the navigation and the way that it's all laid out, then let's go in and add this automation to supercharge your process. Don't get too worried about that right from the beginning, because we want to make sure we get your foundation in place the right way. Once you get that foundation in place the right way, it's really easy to automate and scale from there. But what is not easy to do is if you come in and start automating before you have your foundation in place, it just makes it a mess, and it makes it really hard to go back and change things after the fact. So contact roles, file roles, fields, those 3 are really important. Then emails and tasks. Those are kind of the 5 most important. We talked about triggers earlier. Let me touch on that just because you should have this in your mind for the future. You can eliminate the number of people you need to do on so many transactions. Like you can supercharge the amount of transactions one person can do. But basically what these automated triggers are on our most upgraded plan is the ability to say, If contract title is not blank, then I want you to send this text message. So think of it this way. Instead of going to a task and having to check off a task to get it to go to the health bar, forget that. Let's just say if this field, if I change this field to completed and this document exists, go ahead and send this text or this email. This is the real power when you get to this part of the program. Totally not something to focus on at the beginning, but I want you to have the end in mind when you're looking at this. This is how I run my business, and we've cut out about 90% of our transaction time by using automated triggers, because now all my TCs have to do is fill out fields when things come in, and it triggers things to happen. If I fill out this field, I want this text to go out. If I fill out this field, I want this email to go out, a template to be added, a field to be added. If I add a contact, it may trigger something. If I add a document, it may trigger something. So you can see the power that you can get into as we move forward. In intake forms, you can add custom questions. Yes, of course. Yeah, definitely. So that's one of the power of it, is that you can come into your intake forms and you can ask them questions like, is there financing? Is there an HOA? Is there septic, well, FERPTA, all these things that affect our transactions. And by saying yes to those, now you're going to trigger things to happen in the transaction. So you're going to say, if well is yes, I want my well fields to come in. I want my well tasks to come in. I want my well documents to come in. I want my well blah, blah, blah. Now the TC doesn't have to use that brain power to think about, what do I need to do if it's financing? The system takes over and does all that stuff for you so that you're ready to go when you open up that transaction. And those are just fields, right? So questions are fields. So go to your field editor, and you can even have a separate section for that. You can create a field group called agent intake questions. And here are all my questions I'm going to ask them. Maybe I want to ask them, is there a homeowner association? Was it built prior to 1978? Is there a home warranty, survey, cash deal with an appraisal contingency? Weird stuff, right? All the weird stuff that you see, you can put as a question. They can quickly say yes, 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 no, 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 no. And that's going to set your transaction up perfect for you as you get in there to start working it. And now it's going to remind you, because you said there's a solar, you may have 5 extra tasks in your task of your in your task list on your property, because it knows that they said yes to solar. And so now you have to do these 5 extra things. So really, really powerful. Can you please go over the top things to concentrate on setting up initially again? Yeah. And feel free to reach out to the implementation team or support, and they can get you this information again. But my opinion, and our implementation team has a really good flow. So you should definitely talk to them and get their opinion too. But the way I set mine up was contact roles first, file roles, and file. Let me actually just go through this real quick, so we don't have any other questions. Contact roles, CC on all attorney emails, BCC on all, these are so powerful. Having the right contact roles. If a mom and a dad's helping a son buy a house, you may want them as a BC or a CC on all buyer emails. They're not a buyer. You don't want to screw up your transaction by inputting them as a buyer so that they get those emails. What you want to do is create an email template that goes to the buyer, but also anyone you put on CC on all buyer emails and BCC on all buyer emails. Now I can put them in the appropriate place. They're a CC on all buyer emails. They're still going to get every email that goes to that buyer, but now it's not screwing up my system telling me that they're a buyer when they're really not. They're just a family helping each other. Same thing with escrow assistance. If you're in an escrow state, oh God, I've had so many people like, hey, can you copy these 7 assistants on this every email that goes out? I'm like, how the heck am I going to remember this? Now it's as easy as going in the contacts and popping in them on a CC on all escrow emails tab. And now they're getting every email the escrow officer gets, but I don't have to remember every single time. So power of contact roles, there's plenty of videos and support and everything about this. Feel free to reach out to us. We can walk you through this. Really important to get these in and get them in correct from the beginning so that you can do your template emails the correct way. File roles, I get really detailed. So as you go up in tiers, it's going to be more important that you get very detailed on what these documents are, because every iteration of this document could have automation attached to it. If I get a buyer signed addendum 1, well, I'm going to want to automatically attach it to an email and send it off to the seller to get their signature. But if it's seller signed, I want a totally different email to go to the buyer to get their signature. Or if it's a fully executed, I want to send it out to all parties so they have a record of it, or send it to title, or send it to the lender, or whatever. you can see how important it is. So I put these little suffix on here to say BS is buyer sign, FE is fully executed, SS is seller sign, AS is agent sign, US is unsigned. The more iterations of the same document you have in a file roll, the more you can control what automation is happening and create less work for you and your TCs. So what I did was I went into zip form at the time is what we were using. Now we're using transaction desk. And I basically grabbed every single document from our state and I went ahead and made a file roll out of it. And then I looked at it and said, who could initial and who could sign this? And then I made another iteration of, what stage it could be in. So that will help you immensely once you get to the top tier plan. If you're on the bottom tier plan, not as important yet, but still can be important because you can automatically attach these to emails, which is incredible. And then you can also say, if the buyer sign version of this is do I have it, then also add this smart block to this email. So there's a lot of different points in the transaction or in our program where you can use these to automate either smart blocks or emails or whatever. So those are the first two things that I went through in my system. Implementation may tell you a little bit different, or maybe they have a different way to do it that fits in better with what they're teaching. But those are the two ways that I like to do first. And then I like to go to my fields and I like to get about 80% of my fields in. You're never going to have 100% to begin with because you're just not going to be able to think of everything until you get in here and start building. So get about 80% of what you think is really good, a really good base. Make sure you're using sections to section these up really nicely so that you can say if it's financing, bring in the whole financing section. If it's septic, bring in my whole septic section. Try to group these together. And then start thinking, you don't have to do this right from the beginning, but I like to use choice fields because I like to say, if I choose choice number one, like the buyer's accepting the premises as is, I have a totally different email going out in that case. So as soon as my TC says, I select as is, well, now I have a standard email that's set to go out that talks about how we're accepting the property as is. We'll go ahead and order the appraisal, blah, blah, blah. If they said they want repairs or a credit, then I have a totally different email going out. And all that's based on the selection that the TC makes in my fields. So choice fields are really cool. Number fields are really cool. A lot of different choices on the fields, and we have plenty of videos to go through in detail on how all those work. After that, it really comes down to me personally, emails and then triggers. But for most people, they are a task-based person. Most of this industry is task-based, so you're going to want to focus on your email templates and then your task templates. Email templates, I would say, don't worry about smart blocks yet. Obviously, the implementation team has a pre-built account they can download into your account, and they have some smart blocks in there. They have intake forms. They have some of the stuff pre-built for you, so it's not so much build time at the beginning. But I wouldn't focus if you're brand new to the program, you're just getting used to it too much on smart blocks at the very beginning, at least without the help of our team. And then task templates. And then later you can turn these tasks into fully automated triggers as I showed you, but you want to do things the way you do them now. So if you're using tasks now, start with tasks. If you're using a manual transaction with no intake form, then that's what you should do in our program at the beginning. And then gradually work your way up with our help. Hey, maybe you want to introduce a couple of triggers to take off some of those tasks, or maybe you want to put some smart blocks in your existing emails so you don't have to constantly edit those emails. We can help you through each of those stages to supercharge what you already have. And then we can get up to the point where you're doing, I talked to a lady a couple months ago, she's doing 160 pendings by herself, but she's very far along with her smart blocks and her intake forms and all that. That's not to put pressure on you guys or it's kind of like this Facebook life, right? You see these guys doing 150, 160 pendings. That's not where you're at right now. Don't worry about that, but know that that's where you can get to. So if you just take the proper steps and go slow, we can get you to a point where you're super, super efficient. Okay, sorry. I went off on kind of a tangent there. But
I think it was good. And that's really close to what we say in implementation too. Get your contacts in here, get your file roles in here, check out your fields. The only thing I would add is maybe you can import your task templates if you do have a spreadsheet. A lot of you guys are coming from paper and pen. If you're transferring over from TC workflow, those task templates should have already come over when you made that migration into open to close. So
now
it's the only thing I would add
bring
there.
in these, there will be some more work to do still. So like
for TC workflow.
Yeah, when you come into your tasks, you're still going to have some work because we do have other things like roles that you have to assign to your task, but it will at least get your task lists
Yep.
in the system. So,
Yep.
What time do we got here? Okay, we got time. Can we please go over the top? Oh, that was the one. Okay. To continue with file roles, what's the best way to set up document templates using all the variations? Yeah, so I mean, it's really personal preference, and people will argue with me on this for sure. It's really how you want to do it. For me, I like to keep task templates, document templates, things like that, very small, like this. HOA docs. If there's an HOA on the property, all the docs that have to do with HOAs, I want to put them in one folder or maybe two folders, but all in one template so that I can say, if someone checked yes to HOA on the intake form, then I'm bringing in the appropriate HOA documents that I need in my transaction. Now, I may have one for ones that are required for compliance. Maybe I have 4 documents that are always required for compliance no matter what. And then I may have another folder down here, HOA 2 or HOA sometimes not needed or whatever you want to call it. And it may be like 4 other documents that sometimes you have to fill out. You could put those all in one if you wanted to and just know the difference. And you could also put missing on the ones that are always required for compliance and make the ones gray, not missing, the ones that aren't always needed for compliance. So plenty of different ways to skin a cat here, but think of it like tasks where I want my question in the intake form to correlate to the template that I'm creating. So I never want to create a humongous file. I want to be able to say, hey, if this agent's with Keller Williams in the intake form, then I want to add my Keller Williams specific compliance documents to come in. If they're with EXP, I want my EXP compliance documents to come in. If there's a well on it, I want my well documents to come in. So you may have multiple folders here, these folders. So let me go over to a transaction real quick. I don't even know if I have any documents in here, but we can, okay, let me just add some real quick. Okay, so you may have different folders in here. But what you can do is after they're all done, you can come up with a color system like green's going to be my completely done and then roll it up to collapse. And now you don't even have to look at those documents anymore if you don't want to. So there's some little cool strategies that you can come up with. You can also put notes on all these. So like you can have a toggle notes and have these visible or not visible, say completely done, missing a signature, missing an initial on page 4, like a million things you can do in these documents as well. But to answer your question, I like to split them up into questions from the intake to triggers coming into my transaction. If we migrated from TC Workflow, can we still have just the smart blocks added from the Teams pre-built template? Not automatically. Let me think automatically. Yeah, we can actually automatically, I think. It does, there is a fee because we have to manually do the process. I'll have to get that. I don't, it's not much. It's like just an hour of someone's time to do. So it's like, you know, $20, $30, something like that. But yeah, if you want a list of those, reach out to support, ask them, and then I can approve that. We don't typically do that, but since you're on here and you're seeking knowledge, I have no problem doing that for you. Cool. That is all the questions. Any last questions? We got 3 more minutes. If you have any last things that are burning your mind up, let me know. If you, what was that one?
I'm so sorry. If you have required a form such as a contract, but it could be BS, SS, or FE, then would you have all of those variations under the required folder?
Yeah, well, so here's how you would do it is, go to my documents. Okay, so here's the document, right? And you have, well, it depends. Okay, so if you want to keep all 3 of those in a separate location, you can, or you could have the fully executed one as your main file, and then in your additional documents, you could have the seller and buyer sign one. So to answer your question, you come in here, let's just say you get the buyer sign one first. You come in here and say buyer signed. I have mine set up so that as soon as I put a file role on it, it renames the file to whatever my file role name is. I always have been a big proponent about having standard file names exactly the same every single time so that when we look in a folder, we know exactly what we're looking for. If you don't like that, go in your default settings and you can change it to, you can manually change every document. I think it's a waste of time, but you know, it depends on your flow and how you do things, whether that makes sense for you. So I have a buyer signed, okay? Now, let's say I get the buyer and seller signed, but it's not fully executed yet. Maybe there's a third person going to sign it. What I can do is a couple different things. I can move this one to my additional files. So I can either replace this file, I can move this file over to my additional files, which would show up in here. So now I could have the BS and I could have an SS, and then I could in the main file have the fully executed. Or if you wanted to, I mean, it's totally up to you. I don't like these notes open too, unless you're in California. There's like California kind of needed because you have so much that you're dealing with. But I like to keep these as clean as possible. So you could have buyer sign, seller sign, fully executed, all 3 lines. I don't prefer that. I think it gets a little messy and clogged up. But like I said, why don't, if you contact support or contact our implementation team, we can walk through your specific instance and see if it makes sense for you, because I hate to give broad answers because every state is so different. Every workflow from TC company to agent, you know, is so different that we like to look at your specific situation to make sure we're giving you the right advice. But for me, just in a general, if I had to give a general answer, I would say keep the main file as your fully executed once it's done, and then put your additional files, your old files or iterations of that file in your additional files for safekeeping. All right, cool. 1 o'clock on the dot, my time, Mountain. You guys have any other questions? Feel free to hit up support. I really appreciate you guys being on here. We had a good crowd today. We're here to answer all your questions, so don't feel stuck. Don't feel like you have to search for an hour. We're redoing all our videos right now and procedures and trying to get those a little bit more organized for you guys. But don't sit there and try to figure something out for 2 hours. Like, reach out to support. That's what we're here for. We can at least get you pointed in the right direction, so that you're not wasting a bunch of time on this setup. We do have an implementation team. We are talking about maybe some more group classes, more things like that to get you guys engaged and get you on the road to efficiency a lot faster. So feel free to reach out about that type of stuff, but we'll be making announcements through the next year and trying to give you guys a better package to kind of implement this software in a way that's going to save you a lot of money and time in your business. So that's one of our main goals. Okay, again, thanks for being here. Really enjoyed this one, and we will see you same time, same place next week. Have a great week.